leave it up to Colin and the Donovan, because that's what's that? Let's get ready.
One thing that I did, we're going to talk about the New York Post story that happened, that
did not happen?
Right? That did not happen, maybe didn't happen. We're going to talk about big tech censorship that, like, I don't know, maybe we've been talking about for at least a year now, of shadow banning and being able to be put on lists and hide things, and like a small group of people deciding what you can and can't consume on the internet. Weird, right? All these people that were like,
weird.
That's dumb. You know,
because
it's so crazy that you would think that, but
yeah, and it's getting real hard to try to have like libertarian mindsets on this one, because the offense towards the public at this point was so egregious.
Yes,
like I'm really like, can we just regulate them motherfuckers? But no, I don't want that.
Yeah,
we'll get into it.
Did you hear, I think it was Ben Shapiro that was talking about it, and he said, I wonder, like, the viewers are going down. I wonder if that's because Joe Biden. Anyway, not important. Ben Shapiro was saying that, like, even Maggie Haberman shared something about it on Twitter, and then a bunch of people that, her followers were like, oh, now calling her MAGA Haberman and shit like that, because she's sharing a story that's, like, extremely important and groundbreaking if it's true, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're going to go over the story from the New York Post, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, because it's a pretty crazy story.
It is. Yeah. And then it's like this turned into like this new slow leak thing over time. Yeah. I didn't watch it. I was listening to old Tim Cast IRL from Friday, and they were talking about it with some guy who used to be like a stand-in player for Five Finger Death Punch, by the way. Super weird. Really good IRL. I haven't seen it in a while, but yeah, they were talking about how on Hannity, I guess on Friday, he had dropped some other stuff that's coming out, and Giuliani now is saying that there's going to be another one, I think, in 10 days.
Another
10 days before the election or something like that. He's going to have the big drop or something.
Oh my God.
So who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
It'll
be one of those again.
So if you guys don't know what we're talking about, we'll get into it deeper in the regular show. But earlier this week, there was a story written by the New York Post. I believe that it was on Wednesday that this happened. Yeah. And it is in regards to, I don't want to say too much. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
On like the live stream, but
it had something to do with Hunter Biden.
Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, investments, and companies in the Ukraine and people in the Ukraine. And after it was released on Facebook, they were throttling, the exposure of this story and not allowing people to share the link on their accounts and stuff like that. And then on Twitter, the exact same thing happened, where you couldn't even tweet the article out. It was saying that it was being blocked because it was found to be potentially harmful, which is like
questionable,
very troubling language to hear. So there was a large amount of pushback from pretty much everybody on all sides of the political spectrum on the censorship of what people can and cannot consume or share with their friends.
And it was like on a scale we have not seen to date. Like, it took over the internet. People that I just could not believe would comment on that, and which is kind of funny because it took away from what the actual story was.
Yes.
Or may not be, or whatever. It was just a story put out by a conservative outlet that got, for everybody to see. You could objectively prove that it was throttled and removed from circulation via the admins at Facebook and Twitter, and there was no argument against that. And that story alone, because I think deeply, it definitely is more important than the actual story about Hunter themselves, but that became the story, and it totally overshadowed the Hunter Biden stuff, which is really interesting in and itself.
And it's almost like, at least for the time being, the quote unquote the cover up is worse than the crime. What
there it is. There it is.
Actually happened. Yeah, it's like not even as relevant to everything else. And now, it's being called, Russian disinformation, like all this stuff. Like, I was watching CNN this morning, and I'm like, is this really what you're doing? Like, this is the angle that you're going to take?
Do you remember? Like, it wasn't that long ago.
On Twitter and everything. It's crazy. It's pretty wild.
The times we live in.
Yeah, so we're going to get into that. If we have time, we're going to talk about some stuff that's happening with the ATF and the Honey Badger, because that's pretty wild. There's, for people who don't know about that, I'd hate for us to talk more about guns down more like a gun guy podcast, but you and I kind of talked about it on Thursday, and the fuckery, for lack of a better term, happening within the ATF, banning particular pistol braces on certain guns, classifying them as SBRs, so that people who own them already now are either going to have to register them with, under the the NFA, or they're felons.
Yep.
People who've already purchased them at the time they were totally legal firearms, and now they're
not
registered differently. Yeah, it's not good. It's a really bad situation. It's extremely concerning, and it's something that if you aren't into guns, it's very easy to write off as like it just doesn't matter. But
or you may not even know about it.
You probably don't even know. Yeah, but if you had a friend who was into guns that was like, they're coming after me, like I'm telling you, the honey badger, you're going to be like, what the fuck is the honey badger? Like, why do I even give a shit about, Q, some fucking random company in the Northeast? Like, why do I care about this?
You're not talking in the Northeast, too. It's weird.
Exactly, yeah. So, very, very concerning.
Again, we have a story there that has the actual important reason to talk about the story runs so much deeper than the actual story itself. Like, just the honey badger itself, excuse me, or, the parts in play and stuff like that, and what may or may not trigger certain regulations, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's not even really the story. The overall precedent that would be set if the ATF and stuff was allowed to do this and get away with it, it would set a very dangerous precedent. That means they could fuck with firearms on a completely new scale.
Coupled with the potential for a Joe Biden presidency, right? As I was watching, because now I need you to watch the town hall so that we can talk about it. Because as I was watching the Joe Biden one, there were legitimate moments where I was like, this is not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he sounded way better, was put together. He wasn't slurring. He wasn't stumbling. There was none of that. You know what I'm saying? He was able to talk while not being interrupted, was able to talk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just go. And it was a lot of policy all crammed in, so it wasn't like super easy to follow the whole time, but it's not because he was just babbling. It's because he was talking about so much shit in one answer to one question. Yeah, just jamming everything in. And I think
of course I didn't watch that one because the first time something of substance happened.
And I think it's because the potential for another debate this week, he's not going to have that opportunity if he's there with Donald Trump to say everything that he just said, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
As we've seen in the
first
debate.
You don't think he learned his lesson, huh?
He's likely not going to have that time. So, yeah, so there were times where I was like, well, okay, like not that I agree with it, because most of the shit I don't agree with, but it's like he doesn't sound terrible. He doesn't sound like he's falling apart like he has in the past.
Because he's done it. He's proven that he can do that when it's absolutely needed over the last month or two.
Yeah, but then things would happen. Okay, so this is why I got to this, right? Coupled with the potential of a Joe Biden presidency, and one of the big things that they've been running on is gun reform, right?
Yes.
Is firearms reform, new legislation. We want to put the AR-15 under the NFA so that you either have to register it or turn it in, and that is not something. There's things like that happen. I'm like, okay, well, you lost me. Regardless of what I think about raising tax rates, lowering tax rates, doing these certain things, like changing this shit, then you're talking about. You're talking about guns. You know what I'm saying?
Then you're really talking about guns.
You're talking about shit that really is stuff that it's like a non-starter for me. If you're talking about having to register, it's not. It's not.
It always leads there. It always leads there.
Yes.
It's not like we can just have we tried with 1639. That was something we thought maybe middle of the road people could get on board with, and I just don't think we're there anymore. Coming from that side of the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's almost every one of these issues, when you get closer and closer to an election, all these issues become really, really compressed. And it's talking points at that point. Because even during our debates, 5-10 minutes is pretty good for the contemporary media environment we live in. But it's not like an hour. It's better than 2 minutes.
Like the State of the Union, when he has to give a State of the Union address for 4 years in a row. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's going to be something else. Donald Trump's have been longer. I think they've been the longest ones in history.
Yeah. And if he was semi-coherent, you could he might have time throughout those lengths of, rallies and shit. You can actually get some substantive stuff talked about. Yeah. But he doesn't do that, which is a shame.
He even laid out a genuine legal theory as to why he didn't believe Amy Coney Barrett should be confirmed right now, which I don't agree with, but it wasn't just like, I just don't like it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if you watched the Steven Crowder video that I sent you, like the new Change My Mind that he did was for confirming Amy Coney Barrett.
Yep.
And I mean, they're all college kids, right? So you also I don't hold the same expectations that I do of like a grown adult of someone Joe Biden.
Which in itself is sad.
But it was all just like, well, I feel like this. I feel like this. This is what I feel like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Joe Biden was like, well, in the Constitution, this is not, in my opinion, concurrent with this, you know? And he was saying similar to what one of those other kids was saying, was that he just feels like there should be another election so that people can vote for their senators because, you know, it's supposed to be, there's like 2 particular words I just don't remember right now, but like approved, checked and approved, or, you know what I'm saying? That like the Senate is supposed to do for whatever the...
And confirm, I believe, is in one of those. Yeah, consent and confirm.
Yeah, maybe? Yep. Yes. Okay.
Something like that.
Exactly. So, you know, they're supposed to do this, and that's how, you know, the people have their say in this, and so we need to have an election so they can elect their senators, and then this can be done. That's all well and good, but that's not how this works. Like, so, like that's, and it clicked for me that the 2 different actual theories for the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett is almost like an originalist and a textualist interpretation of the Constitution, of whether or not you feel like it's just 4 years, or you're like, well, that's all well and good, but, you know, now Joe Biden was talking about once we're in an election, there's an implication that the people then need to have a say in what's happening, and I'm like, implicate my asshole, like that's not that is absolutely not how the Constitution works. We implying this and this, like that's
And I'd say it, but if you didn't see that argument coming from the minute they talked about early voting, vote early, vote now, you know, we're talking like states, people have been voting for a long time already.
Right.
In a lot of states. A lot of mail-in stuff going on, a lot of lines even at polling places. So, like, they preach that, and now they can actually speak to it constitutionally. They got something in their favor.
But I appreciated there was an actual idea proposed, and
a
not
substantive argument,
and not just like, fuck Donald Trump, he shouldn't be doing this because it's not right. But he did, however, when he was asked about court packing, Joe Biden was like, he said he wasn't going to answer, right? But then he said the people do deserve to know after the election, right?
Not right
and
now.
It's like, and whether or not my opinion on packing the courts depends on how things are handled right now before the election. Like, what does that even mean? Like, that's not an answer to whether or not you're going to pack the courts. That's, if Amy Coney Barrett gets in, I'm going to do what I can to pack the courts, and if she doesn't, then I'm not going to.
Basically,
that's exactly what that means.
He can't agree to it if he knows that they won't win the Senate, or if one of the other houses flips and they don't control all 3 houses, essentially, then he can't sign on for that because it'll never happen. And then he doesn't want to have that argument because it's not a good argument he's going to win.
And I had conversation with Josh Keaton like last week maybe, when Joe Biden originally said that the people didn't deserve to know whether or not he was going to do it, right? I shared that video and was tweeting about it. And Josh Keaton, I mean, have conversation all the time, so I'm not denigrating him. This is just the conversation we had. We said, you know, it's like, it's not unprecedented like FDR tried to do it or whatever. I'm like, and that's all well and good, but just because somebody else would do it, or like the GOP would do it if it was their side, and that's fine, but just because somebody else would do it, that doesn't make it okay. Like, doing a shitty thing is not okay just because somebody else would also do it in this position. Like, especially if you're a politician, I expect you to step above that. And I don't care if there are 45-year-olds who be like, "Oh, I've been voting, you know, since I was 18 years old, and that's just ideological, and you're just thinking in the positive." No, I believe all Americans should hold their politicians to a higher standard than we're doing now. We need to expect all of them to be doing better than they're doing right now. I don't think that should be ludicrous. That needs to be a more closely held view for all Americans, not just a subsidiary. That's not the right thing. Like a subsiding idea of just like, well, that's just how it is, you know, just rolling over like this. That's just politics. Like, no, that's completely against the idea that those same people are going to preach of like the American spirit. Like, it's the American way. You got to keep hustling like it's hard. You know, it's the American dream. Like, then why are you not fighting for that even in your personal beliefs of holding people, your representatives, to a higher standard? Why should we not expect them to be better? That's ludicrous to me. And I don't, you know.
And that's the old argument about what is, but what ought to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You hear that a lot, is and ought. But I was going to say, I believe you were right when you were going to say it's a subsidiary idea of. I was just thinking about it. I was like, no, I think that was a good word.
Yeah,
Use that. Your vocabulary is impressive today.
Thank you very much.
And to get back to it, I don't want to dive any deeper necessarily into that because I still think we're going to talk about that more in the main show in some capacity.
Oh, this is the main show now. It's too
late. Yeah,
late.
right. We've bleeded over. We're 21 minutes in, people. We've bled over. So that's just a nice. Well, this is a good preview of what the full show is like. Because sometimes we get on here, we just screw around for the pre-show and have some fun.
Right. Because I watched all but the last 20 minutes of the Joe Biden town hall, and I watched all of the Donald Trump one. I watched Donald Trump yesterday at work, and then I watched the Joe Biden one this morning before Dax woke up. But he's been waking up fucking 6:45. This little guy. So
weird.
That's just.
Is that you're not working out?
That's just
not
how
good?
he is. I don't know. That's just where we're at right now.
Okay.
That's just his current.
I was like, I am not educated enough to know whether that's a good or a bad. Hard no. I don't want to hang out with anybody at 6:45. Me either. Okay.
I get up at 5:15. I get up at 5:15 to be alone. That's why I get up at 5:15 on the days I don't have to work.